Batman Arkham Origins is considered by many to be the black sheep of the original 4 Arkham games. Not being developed by Rocksteady and having a nearly entirely new voice cast, it's definitely the most unique of the 4 games released on console. But with a new game comes new lore and new elements we must comb over to confirm their canonicity. So with some help from a resident Arkham Origins expert, let's delve into Batman Arkham Origins and see what's important and what we can leave behind. Let's begin with one of the most annoying misconceptions in the franchise, the CGI trailer everyone thinks of when they think of Arkham Origins promotional material. You know, the one where Batman fights Deathstroke in the dockyard and is interrupted by Deadshot. Well, unfortunately, as cool as it would be to say it's canon, it physically can't be. From Arkham Origins, we know that Batman and Deathstroke do not meet until their fight on the final offer. The same goes for Deadshot. Floyd doesn't fight Batman or come into contact with him until the night of Christmas Eve in the game. And if he'd already met Slade at any point, why? Slade is a contract killer, we know this. Why would he go after Batman before the events of the game? Well, put simply, he wouldn't. Same goes for Deadshot. This means the events of this trailer cannot be canon in the new timeline, and take place simply to Aura Farm during promotional sequences before the game was released. With that out of the way though, what about Origins Online? Hell, what about that disgusting little Blackgate game that I totally don't despise? Well, I've drafted in someone who knows all about Arkham Origins' recently revived online mode, and its weird, gross little cousin, Arkham Origins Blackgate. So, Ranger, are they canon?
We are diving deep into these forgotten parts of the Arkham series, Charles. Well, hello everyone, I am Ranger, a guy who likes Arkham Origins, especially its online mode. But first, let's investigate this Blackgate mystery. What is this game anyway? Why are we even talking about it? Well, first, dear viewer, allow me to explain. Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate was a side game to Origins. It was released alongside it on the 25th of October 2013. This game is actually the first sequel to Warlord Boss Against Montreal's title, taking place 3 months after the events of the main game, meaning it takes place around March of year 3 in Batman's career, and 3 months before the events of Arkham Shadow. Since they were released on the same day, the intention is clear. They are meant to be viewed as one experience. Sure, many people in the Arkham community, maybe even some of you too, did not consider Blackgate to be part of the Arkham franchise due to A, being a handheld game at first, later ported to consoles and PC, and having low-breaking elements in them. Let's debate these elements, shall we? Those who have played Arkham Shadow, or at least watched some videos about it, will know that the game makes it super clear that Blackgate is indeed canon. Many locations are recreated from it, and there are many references and Easter eggs in connection with the game. But even without using the latest Arkham game for providing evidence, why would Blackgate be canon? The answers are quite simple actually. First, the game builds upon the post-credit scene of Arkham Origins. At the end of that game, we saw how Amanda Waller tried to recruit Deathstroke into her team. In Blackgate, we see her full efforts on getting more and more powerful villains to join into her Death Force X. She ends up getting Bronze Tiger and Deadshot to be part of the first Suicide Squad. She even tried to get Bane on the team. This brings us to the other reason, its connection with Origins Online. Around the last hours of the game, we learned that Catwoman was blackmailed by Waller to help her get Bane from Blackgate. The riot was all part of the plan. Only Batman Present wasn't. We see how Bane was drained from his TM1 and how he did not lose all of his intelligence. Even though Batman defeated Catwoman, Bane still escaped only to be found and captured by Waller's right-hand man, Rick Flag. At the very end of the game, we learned that Waller was forced to let go of Bane and Selina to the local authorities. Did Bane get back to Blackgate? Probably not, he got transferred somewhere. To where? Who knows really. All that matters is that this side game completely explains how Bane became normal again after the events of Origins. At Blackgate, he lost all of his TM1 he had in his system, he got transferred somewhere, built back all of his muscle that he lost, escaped, rebuilt his gang with the help of Bird, just so he can wage a gang war against the Crown Prince of Crime. Even one of the multiplayer maps, Wayne Chemical Plant, builds upon this idea. The gang's objective here is to take control of the chemical plant so they can turn it into a venom production facility. And what would Bane need the most after losing TM1? Lots of venom. It makes perfect sense if you ask me. Also, Robin's Present makes online take place after Shadow and not after Origins. This is something that got retconned. Since Origins Online was also shipped alongside the single player campaign, we can justify that these 3 games, for, if we count Shadow, built upon the idea of seeing Batman's early career, how he became Gotham's Dark Knight alongside his first sidekick, Robin. With this, we can also claim that the idea of Origins Online is canon. Gameplay is obviously not, since Batman and Robin cannot die this early in the timeline, can they? But if any of you care about the gameplay side of Online, feel free to check out my channel where I post gameplay videos of it, and join the Charts server where we are playing it every week. Finally, let's talk about Harleen Quinzel. Although she does not make a physical appearance in Blackgate, her presence is still there. Collecting enough clues and solving case files explain to us that after Origins, she became obsessed with Joker. She had notes of him, hell, she even supplied the clan with various tools that he used to take over the administration building during the events of Blackgate. Shadow only builds upon this idea further, and we saw the beginning of this in Origins. It's all connected. What about Grundy? Why is he in Blackgate? How does Batman know him? Well, one of the case files explains that Grundy was looking for a home under the sewers of the prison. That's why he was there. And according to Shadow, Batman did meet Grundy before, probably during the 3-month window between Origins and Blackgate. In Arkham City, there are zero reasons that would let us believe Batman only met Grundy there. Quite the opposite actually. Batman having zero reaction to him can be explained here. He knew Grundy. With these, Blackgate and Online were explained as being canon to the series.
Thanks, Ranger. Now let's move on to the DLC. Arkham Origins has some of the coolest DLC in the franchise. All of it goes a long way to expand the first couple of years of the Dark Knight's career, and I've always thought that pound for pound, it has the best DLC story in the series. But that aside, let's start with the very first thing we ever see Bruce Wayne do, the Initiation DLC. His initiation into becoming a night-stalking creature of justice. This DLC takes place in year zero, so to speak, a time period where there wasn't a Batman, but there was a young, angry man who would soon become Gotham's Dark Knight. This DLC is canon in its entirety, and although it might be strange with it being exclusively a challenge map-based story DLC, it's as informative and engaging as any other of Arkham's story content. We get a great look at the training Bruce went through and how it toughened him up and prepared him for Gotham's mean streets, and it also shows us the first time Bruce meets Shiva. Now, I'm of the firm belief that Lady Shiva was definitely supposed to be a bigger part of the series after Origins released, but nonetheless, this is the first time Bruce meets her and the two fight, setting up their eventual confrontation during the events of Arkham Origins. The next DLC I wanted to focus on is the duo of challenge maps surrounding Deathstroke. These are an interesting little case point because in theory there's nothing to say these aren't canon besides the fact we know Slade probably didn't enter the final offer and begin slaughtering Penguin's men. We can also safely assume he didn't do all of this after he and Batman fight, since Bruce ties him up and we know he ends up in Blackgate, thanks to the interaction between him and Batman during the Joker's riot and the final cutscene which shows us Slade being transported to, somewhere within the prison. Also, the Nightfall DLC is not canon. It's very fun, but unfortunately we never get any confirmation that Azrael, that being Michael Lane or Jean-Paul Vallée, ever take up the mantle of Batman at any point. So the Nightfall as we know it to happen, with Bane finding out Batman's identity and wearing him down and ultimately breaking him, can't have happened, since Bane already finds out who Batman is in Arkham Origins. But that isn't to say some form of Nightfall didn't happen at some point. Hell, it's alluded to in Arkham Asylum that Batman has had his back broken by Bane, kind of akin to how he did it in Nightfall. So yes, Nightfall probably did happen, but not as we know it. I would imagine Bane got the better of Batman in a fight one day, and that's how it happened. I don't think he found out his identity again, broke into Wayne Manor, and broke Bruce Wayne's back. So no, these maps aren't canon, but the actual events of Nightfall, or at least the idea that Bane broke Batman's back and put him out of commission, very well might be canon in some form, but hey, maybe we get a game about that one day. That'd be pretty cool. Finally for the DLC, Cold Cold Heart. Probably the series' best bit of DLC, period. Cold Cold Heart follows the first criminal outing of Victor Freeze in the Arkham universe, and we know for sure this is 100% canon to the main Arkham story. The first tell of this is that there is absolutely nothing to deny it at a place at the canonicity table. Nothing at all. The next reason this is canon is that it actually ties directly into Arkham Asylum and the future of the franchise, as we get to hear a a pretty cool radio interview featuring Quincy Sharp at the end of the DLC. This cool little interview, no pun intended, not only confirms it to be canon but outright ties it to the grand reopening of Arkham Asylum, and thus the event of Arkham Asylum itself. Finally, and probably most interestingly, we have direct proof this is canon through the events of its chronological sequel, Batman Arkham Shadow. See, while exploring the yard in Blackgate Penitentiary, you might come across a few familiar faces from Arkham Origins, Bird and Ricky Loose Lips LeBlanc being the most notable, but if you played Cold Heart, you might notice another familiar face, Ferris Boyle. Now, Ferris Boyle was the reason Victor became Mr. Freeze after stabbing him in the back, and following Batman taking them both down, Boyle was thrown into Blackgate, where we can ultimately find him in Arkham Shadow. So, with no contradictions and plenty of ties into other games, we can safely say that Cold Heart is indeed 100% canon to not only Arkham Origins, but the franchise as a whole. With Batman Arkham Origins spanning across two of the biggest playable Gothams we've seen in gaming, it's no surprise it's filled with plenty of fun side content. But you know what type of video this is, so all we're interested in is whether this content is canon to the series or not. Does Batman actually do all of this stuff after or during the events of the main campaign? Well, let's see. The game features a ton of side content, so we'll tackle them one by one to make this a bit more manageable, but to begin with, let's get a few out of the way in one go. So the escaped Blackgate prisoners, Black Mask drug stashes, and Penguin's arms caches are all canon, and even cement the early relationship between Batman and a few of the allies he'd come to rely on in the coming years of his career. Anarchy is canon, there's nothing to say he isn't, and there's actually evidence that he is within Cold Heart, since there are more Anarchy tags to find here. So yes, Anarchy is canon, brutally underused in the story, but important nonetheless. Shiva's side mission, as we discussed earlier, is canon, and although it was never followed up on, we know Shiva had a big impact going forward in the story behind the scenes. So although this may be the last time we see her on screen, her trials are canon, and obviously to cement this, she's one of the assassins after the bounty, which ties directly into the main story. Next up is Deadshot, and obviously following the same line of thought as we did with Shiva, he is also canon. Out of the 8 assassins sent after the bounty on the Dark Knight, Shiva and Deadshot are actually the only 2 not featured in the main campaign, but given that the story outright confirms Floyd as one of the assassins, we can comfortably assume that this is entirely canon to the story of the Arkham timeline. Then when we take a look at the mysteries of the game, the crime scenes and investigations, these are all canon, and that even extends to the Cyrus Pinckney mystery, which if you want to find out a lot more about, you can watch my deep dive video I did a few months ago, which I'll link in the description. Shameless shill aside though, and yes, the crime scenes are all canon, and so is Cyrus Pinckney's death, as it is continued on and followed up on into Arkham Shadow, thus rendering it canon. Mad Hatter is next up on the chopping block, and unfortunately, as creepy as he is fully canon, being one of the most recurring side characters in the series, appearing, or at least being mentioned, in Origins, Asylum, City, and Night, meaning that, yes, Jervis is canon and that the blonde women of Gotham can no longer breathe easily. Until he gets killed by Captain Boomerang, which is the only thing I will ever consider canon from the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League's prequel comics. Finally, Enigma. Now, in previous videos, I questioned the canonicity of Riddler's side missions. I have no doubt that Riddler himself is canon, but in Arkham Asylum specifically, I don't think every Riddler and every trophy is canon. However, this changed in Arkham City, when it's shown Batman has to complete the challenges to save hostages from Riddler's death traps, and the same kind of goes for Arkham Origins. Kind of. See, Riddler's data packs are tangible information Batman must collect, so I see no reason why this isn't completely canon, and I'm happy to say so. I like things being entirely canon, and Riddler's side mission here is 100% important to the timeline, which is probably why Edward begins losing his mind trying to beat Batman come the era of Arkham Knight. And finally, the main campaign. And I know, you'd be surprised how many people still dispute that Origins isn't canon. It's genuinely kind of baffling. Arkham Origins has one of the best stories in the series by far. The narrative that it isn't canon is insane to fathom for someone like me who spends an unhealthy amount of time playing and thinking about these games. The main complaint people have is that the game wasn't written by Paul Dini like Asylum and City, although Night, Blackgate and Shadow would also go on to be Dini-less. We've become pretty accustomed to Paul Dini not writing these stories. At the time this was a deviation from the norm, and thus people turned on it, and some still haven't let it go to this day. But my main argument against this is that if you decide to render Arkham Origins main campaign non-canon, you also render Blackgate and Shadow non-canon, and thus you basically disregard 50% of the mainline playable content in the entire franchise, which is just stupid. You'd also be throwing away all of the character moments and development which define these stories, the relationship between Batman and the GCPD, the foundations being laid for the true partnership between Bruce and Alfred, and obviously the very first meeting between Batman and the Joker, which would come to be the backbone of the series and the two characters' very existence. Now, I don't want to drag this out much longer than I need to, since I think most of you already believe that Origins is canon. However, there is one more part of Origins which we need to talk about, but I don't own the Arkham Omnibus, and Ranger does. So to send us out on a high note, Ranger, are the Arkham Origins comics actually canon?
Thank you, Charles. Many people consider the Arkham comics non-canon in a heartbeat without actually reading them, so I dedicated some time of my life to go deep into this rabbit hole. Is the Arkham Origins prequel comic canon? The task was already hard, since this comic is a choose-your-own adventure story, where you, the reader, has the option to make choices in different scenarios, and your decisions have an impact on the story. Since I own the Arkham Omnibus, it was easy for me to reread the comic, take notes of various choices, paths, and dialogues, to map out not just the most canonical ending to the comic, but also the fact if it can be considered canon at all. The comic has 22 different endings, 7 good and 15 bad endings. But before we delve into the endings, let's explore the setup. The story takes place months before the main game, probably during the summer season or early autumn, maybe September. Due to people wearing shorts, sunglasses, and overall it gives some more of a summery vibe, if you know what I mean. Election day is around the corner, and Batman needs to investigate a conspiracy between the GCPD and the underworld of Gotham. That's the story basically. Obviously, the endings where Batman gets killed are not canon, so we are left with 7 potential endings. The most good endings are from the Flash route, where Batman investigates the corrupt detective. Brandon's and Loeb's path only have one good path for each of them. Flash's endings are not that different from each other, but the key details are the following. Batman meets and fights Humpty Dumpty for the first time, who is working under Flash. Humpty kidnaps Alexandra Dent, the new DEA, Harvey Dent's sister, so they can manipulate him further down the line. Batman saves Alexandra, and all the events lead to the elections being delayed, and this is where the problems start to arise. If we try to consider all the little details, cameos, and lines the comic has to the main Origins game, we realize that it's impossible to make it canon. First, let's mention the reasons why the comic can be canon. Elections are mentioned and are important for both the comic and the game. Loeb explains in his audio files that he is getting ready to take even bigger control over the city. This idea is showcased in the comic too. Brandon works with Silence. We know this from the game, since Brandon's SWAT unit was allowed to participate in the hunting for the Batman. Ratcatcher working for Black Mask is something that Shadow explains further, and since Shadow is canon, this detail makes the connection stronger. And now, let's talk about the law-breaking stuff. Brandon is against Loeb. Like, he's trying to sabotage his election result, even though they are working clearly together in the game. Loeb doesn't know about the crime bosses helping him out. This is nonsense since we saw and heard about his and Black Mask's partnership. Also, Brandon is trying to run for mayor, or at least as commissioner. Like, the comic similarly hints at this idea, and that makes the logical answer to why Brandon tries to sabotage his boss, but this is never brought up in the game. Gordon being a dirty cop, or at least Batman is believing it. In Gordon's bio, which is written by Batman, it makes it clear that Bruce thinks highly of him. He knows he's not corrupt like the rest of the station. Also, Gordon never met Batman before the events of Arkham Origins. He still knows he's real, since he is leading the anti-Batman task force. His line from the beginning was just a lie he told to the news. Later Bullock makes fun of this. But like in the comic, they can meet, and they can interact, and even if you try to take the route where you don't meet Gordon at all, then you have another problem, which is Batman meeting Penguin before the story. Although he have been following his operation, but like Batman never had a one-to-one with Penguin before Arkham Origins. And the comic tries to make Penguin powerful, but in the game he's he's not. Like, he's just a new guy. And in the game, he takes low profile, so that's why Batman and anyone else was unable to track him down, like where his hideout is, while in the comic, he is actively getting in firefights with the police, with Black Mask, like he's actively there. So people know that he is Oswald Cobblepot. So this is just stupid. So no, the Choose Your Own Adventure comic is not canon at all. It is a fun and unique read, but it just cannot be slided into the Arkham timeline. Hope you guys learned something new about the Arkham canon, and thank you Charles for allowing me to be part of the video.
So that's all from me and Ranger for today. Arkham Origins is one of my favourite games of all time, and I know Ranger feels the same way, so it felt right to collab on this and bring you the definitive canon guide to the Arkham series' initial Black Sheep. All of Ranger's links will be down below, so go show him some love and make sure to say hello. This video wouldn't have been possible without him and his knowledge, so again, thank you Ranger. Anyhow, thank you all for watching. As always, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Stay safe out there. Goodbye.